Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into another exciting project, creating the stunning Calacatta Gold marble effect using Venetian plaster. For those who haven't seen my previous work, or if this is new to you, I'll walk you through the entire process, step by step, from the very beginning. So, where do we start? The first crucial step is surface preparation. We begin by applying a high-quality adhesive primer paint. We've chosen a bright white color for our primer. The reason for this is quite simple yet essential. Our primary material, the Venetian plaster, has a white base. By starting with a good, solid white undercoat, we ensure that our final Venetian plaster layers will adhere perfectly and that their true colors will really pop without any underlying wall color interfering. It's about creating the perfect foundation for our artistic work. Once our primer is completely dry, we move on to the star of the show, Venetian plaster. Now, a frequent question I get from many of you is whether Venetian plaster comes in black, green, or other pre-tinted colors. And the answer is always the same. Venetian plaster is only sold as a white base. Any color you see, whether it's black, green, or the beautiful beige tones we'll be using today, is achieved by adding special pigments or colorants to this white base, giving us incredible control over our palette. For the initial layers, I'm taking the pure, untinted white Venetian plaster. I've applied 2 solid layers of this white base to the wall. This creates a smooth, even canvas for the intricate marble pattern we're about to create. After those base layers are down, it's time to start bringing the marble to life. I take some more of the white Venetian plaster, and this time I dilute it with water. I usually aim for about a 20 to 30% dilution. This makes the plaster a bit more fluid, easier to work with, and perfect for creating those delicate vein patterns. Then I add my chosen pigments, in this case, beautiful beige colorants, to achieve the exact shade I need for the Calacatta Gold effect. Now, for the application method, I'm using a common sponge, just an ordinary washing sponge actually. You can also use brushes or even your trowel, depending on the effect you're going for. In my work, I actually use all of them, sponges, brushes, and spatulas, depending on the specific vein or texture I want to create. The idea here is to start building some initial texture and the very first rough veins of our marble. I apply many layers throughout this process. Venetian plaster has a unique property. Its multi-layered nature really becomes apparent when polished. The colors deepen, and the different layers create incredible depth and richness. This means I strategically apply lighter shades in certain areas. The goal is to ensure that when we eventually polish the surface, these lighter colors don't become too stark or overpower the overall aesthetic. We want a harmonious, natural-looking marble, not something that looks artificially bright or too strong when polished. Next, you might notice me doing something that seems counterintuitive: sanding the surface. This is a crucial step to refine the texture we've just created. I'm using sandpaper, typically around a 400 grit. My purpose here is to smooth out any burrs, minor unevenness, or slight ridges that might have formed during the application. If you happen to have more significant ridges or larger imperfections, you'll want to start with a slightly coarser grit, like a 320 grit sandpaper. Then you'd progress to a 400 grit, and eventually, for a really fine finish, you can move to a 600 grit. The general rule is the higher the grit number, the finer the sandpaper, and the better it is at removing any fine scratches left by the previous coarser grit. So it's a progression from rough to smooth. Once the sanding is complete, we need to ensure our surface is perfectly clean. Take a dry cloth or a sponge and carefully wipe away all the dust. This is important so that our subsequent layers adhere properly and the dust doesn't interfere with the final look. Now, with our surface prepped and cleaned, I return to that diluted Venetian plaster. And this is where the magic truly begins, drawing the more detailed, refined veins. To create a realistic marble imitation, I highly recommend doing some research first. Look up pictures of natural marble online. There are countless examples of different types of marble and their unique vein patterns. Study them, understand their flow and complexity. Before committing to your main wall, it's always a good idea to practice. Grab a small piece of plywood or fiberboard and try sketching out some vein patterns. Or, if you have an inconspicuous area on your wall, perhaps a spot that will later be covered by a cabinet or a shelf, you can use that as a practice zone. The goal is to get a feel for the material and the technique, to get your hand in, as we say. This process, I must tell you, is incredibly engaging and rewarding. You're essentially painting for pure enjoyment. Sometimes it might seem challenging at first, but I receive so many emails from aspiring masters, even those attempting this for the very first time, and their results are often absolutely fantastic. So, don't be afraid to try, even if you've never done anything like this before. With a bit of practice, you might surprise yourself. A question that frequently comes up is whether you can achieve a similar effect using acrylic drywall compound or spackle instead of Venetian plaster. While it's true that acrylic spackle can be polished quite well, I generally do not recommend using it for marble imitation. I've tried it myself for similar projects, and there are several important nuances and problems you'll encounter. Firstly, the consumption rate for drywall compound is significantly higher, typically 2 to 3 times more than Venetian plaster for the same area. While the price per container might be lower, sometimes by half, your overall material cost ends up being similar or even higher due to the sheer quantity you need, so you don't really save much money in the long run. Secondly, and perhaps most importantly, polishing drywall compound is incredibly difficult. It requires immense effort, especially if you're trying to achieve a smooth, high-gloss finish by hand with a trowel. Venetian plaster, on the other hand, can be polished relatively easily with a hand trowel. After just one project using drywall compound for this purpose, I'm confident you wouldn't want to use it again. My strong advice is to buy the simplest, most accessible acrylic Venetian plaster and learn to work with that. It's a much more forgiving and rewarding material for beginners.
One of the great advantages of Venetian plaster is its flexibility. If you apply a layer or create a pattern that you're not happy with, you can often simply wipe it off with a damp sponge right away. Or, if it's already dried, you can easily sand it off with sandpaper. There are virtually no problems here. It's almost like a constructor set. You apply layers, and then with these layers, using different colors, you can either hide or reveal the desired pattern. Speaking of versatility, sometimes for the veins, if you find it easier or achieve better results, you can also draw them in with acrylic paint. This is especially effective if you use the same type of acrylic paint that you used for your initial primer layer, as it will be compatible with the surface. After all the veining is complete, I do something that might seem counterintuitive at first, but it's vital for the final look. I take plain white Venetian plaster again and apply another thin layer over everything. Why do I do this? Because the colors you see right now, particularly the veins, will become significantly more saturated and intense once we polish them, sometimes twice as saturated. This can create a very strong, almost eye-popping contrast. To soften this and achieve that natural, subtle depth of real marble, I apply this final, very thin layer of white Venetian plaster. Venetian plaster is a very thin layered material, forming an incredibly delicate film. This final translucent layer helps to subtly blend and mute the intensity of the veins, preventing them from looking too artificial or overpowering. It's critical to test this process on a sample piece beforehand. You need to polish a sample to understand exactly how much the colors will intensify. You don't want the final result to be overly bright or screaming with color. Also, apply the wax to your sample. This will give you the most accurate preview of how the finished sealed surface will look. Once I've applied the final layers and feel the surface is just right, we move on to polishing. This is where the magic really happens, transforming the textured surface into a smooth, lustrous marble imitation. I use an angle grinder with a speed regulation function. For the polishing pads, I highly recommend using discs with a grit of 800 or higher. The finer the grit, the better the shine you'll achieve. Sometimes, if you need to soften a new abrasive pad, you can gently dull it by briefly touching it to concrete. Then you use this pad on your grinder to polish the dry Venetian plaster. You might wonder if you can just polish it by hand with a trowel. While technically possible, polishing dry Venetian plaster entirely by hand is extremely difficult. It's a very labor-intensive process, and you'll often see visible marks left by the trowel. More importantly, you simply won't achieve the same level of brilliant shine that a grinder provides. So my strong advice is to use a grinder for this stage. After polishing, the surface will be covered in fine dust. I carefully clean all this dust away. Then it's time for the final touch, applying wax. I always try to use a wax that's from the same manufacturer as the Venetian plaster. This ensures optimal compatibility and the best possible finish. You'll immediately notice the incredible richness and depth that the wax adds. The white Venetian plaster layers, even after polishing, might leave a slight, almost imperceptible film or haze. But the veins, with their depth, will still be very much present. Once the wax is applied, the colors will become even more vibrant and saturated, truly bringing the surface to life. A quick tip: even after you've polished the surface, if you haven't applied the wax yet, you still have an opportunity to touch up or add any missing veins. Just take your paint and carefully draw them in. If you do this, make sure to let the paint dry for about 3 to 4 hours. This is crucial because if you apply the wax too soon, the freshly drawn paint might simply rub off. Once it's dry, it will adhere properly. Now, for wax application itself, I apply the wax quite densely, using a regular painter's putty knife or spatula. I want to emphasize this point because many people think you need expensive, specialized Venetian trowels for this kind of work. But as you can see, you can achieve excellent results with common, affordable painting tools. There's no need to buy expensive Venetian trowels or worry about where to find them. A standard painter's spatula works perfectly for both applying Venetian plaster and the wax. When applying the wax, try to collect as much excess wax from the surface as possible. If you leave too much on, it can sometimes create yellow spots as it cures. Finally, for polishing the wax, I use a felt polishing pad. You can also use a wool polishing pad, which works quite well too. Luckily, I have these specialized felt attachments. This felt pad does a fantastic job of removing any visible marks left by the spatula during wax application, and it makes the surface incredibly smooth. Many people ask, how long should they wait after applying wax to polish? Technically, I usually polish immediately. However, waxes can vary, so it's always a good idea to practice with your specific material. You might find that some waxes require a bit more time to absorb before polishing. Since I know the materials I work with very well, I can polish right away. And there you have it. This is the finished work, a beautiful imitation of Calacatta Gold marble, achieved with Venetian plaster. The depth, the sheen, the intricate veins, it truly mimics the natural stone. If I've missed anything, or if you have any questions about this process, please don't hesitate to ask. I'll be happy to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more projects and tips. Until next time, everyone, take care.